About 15 years ago, when my daughter was about 11, she called out to me from the kitchen and said, "Dad, where is our 3/4 measuring cup?" She was making a recipe for cookies that required 3/4 of a cup of sugar. As she asked me, she waved this one in front of me and says, "We only have this 1/4 measuring cup." I hung my head in disappointment, not in her, but in our schooling system, because after 7 or 8 years of schooling, she only had one way to think about fractions, and that one way that was given to her did not help her with her problem. In this episode, I'm going to introduce you to the 3 ways that fractions can be interpreted. And when I refer to fractions, I'm referring to the kind that have a numerator and a denominator that we often just call common fractions. And let me be clear, there are other ways to interpret common fractions, but these are the 3 that I believe should be taught in elementary or primary school. And if you stay to the end, I suspect it will change your view of fractions forever. Generally speaking, students first learn about fractions as being part of a whole, and I personally believe that is the most common interpretation that has been taught in schools and is still being taught today. Simply put, it's when we give a student the whole and they have to identify one or more of the equal parts. This exercise here is pretty typical of what you'll see in students' books that teach fractions as being part of a whole. Here they can see the whole and are asked to shade one or more of the equal parts as they learn to write parts of the symbol. And here's a real example involving pizzas. Let's share this pizza equally among 6 people. When we divide the whole into 6 equal parts, we name each part 1/6. In this way, the denominator tells us the number of equal sized parts in the whole, and that is 6. And the numerator tells us the number of equal sized parts in each share. So each person gets 1/6 of the whole. This thinking works well when you're dealing with unit fractions such as 1/6 or even 3/6. But it comes unstuck when you have a quantity greater than a whole such as 7/6. And this leads us to the second and less common interpretation of fractions, and that is thinking about fractions as being numbers or measures. Let me explain. If this counter represents 1/3, what does the whole look like? I guess it looks like this. And what if 2 counters represented 1/3? What does the whole look like? I guess it would be this. That is still 1/3 of the whole. And what if 4 counters represents 4/3? What does the whole look like now? I guess it would look like this. The whole is 3, the 4 makes 4/3. When we think of fractions as numbers or measures, the numerator tells us the number or count of equal sized parts, and the denominator tells us the number or count of equal sized parts needed to make the whole. And this works when you have a number of equal parts that are greater than a whole. And this was the thinking that my daughter needed. She had the 1/4 or 1/4 measuring cup, and she needed to find 3/4 or 3/4. So she should have measured out 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 is 3/4. So starting with a part and building up to the whole, which is very different from the whole to part thinking from the first interpretation. And this exercise, or exercises like this at least, will help students develop that kind of thinking. Finally, let's look at fractions as quotients. Suppose you want to share these 3 pizzas among 4 people. How much pizza does each person get? Now there are many ways to figure this out. We could divide each into fourths, and we'll see each share is 3 of those fourths. We could pretend 3 pizzas as one whole and simply divide that into 4 equal parts. We can then see each share as 3/4. We could give 3 people 3/4 of a pizza each and the last person will get a fourth of 3 pizzas. Or we could pretend 2 pizzas is one whole and share that equally. Then share the last pizza 4 ways so everyone gets 1/2 and another fourth, which is 3/4. In this interpretation, the numerator is the number of items in the whole, in this case 3 pizzas, and the denominator is the number of shares or equal sized parts. So 3 divided by 4 is simply 3/4. The answer is right in front of you. Pictorial exercises such as this will help students develop this thinking. So this is what I want you to do. 1. Remember that young students should be taught 3 interpretations of fractions, that they are parts of a whole, think of them as numbers and measures, and also as quotients. And I've provided a summary of these 3 interpretations in the links. And 2, be sure to give them concrete, hands-on experiences and pictorial representations to help them develop this thinking. Don't just give them another rule or procedure to follow. And finally, if you've seen value in this episode, go ahead and subscribe today to make sure you never miss another learning moment with me. See you next time.